Welcome to 28.5, where we explore a unique and authentic perspective on the women's game, break down upcoming matchups, and discuss the latest news and trends in women's basketball. We are your hosts. I'm Sydney Story, and I played at the University of Tennessee under Pat Summitt.
And I'm Becca Goodman, and I played at the University of Notre Dame under Muffet McGraw. And we're thrilled to have you join us today. Before we jump in, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy what you hear, be sure to tune in each week and support and share the love. Now let's get started with today's episode. Hey, Sid. Man, we are back again with another episode and some amazing games to talk about. Are you excited?
This season has yet to let us down. I'm super excited to walk through some of these tonight.
You know that song, like, time after time? That's how I feel like these games are. Every time you think it's going to go one way, somebody else steps up, somebody off the bench comes in, and there's just some good games. It's absolutely crazy. So let's just jump in, right? So we're going to go through in our first quarter. We're going to kind of do more of a deep dive. We got an expert on the panel here where Sid's going to talk about the Tennessee Lady Vols versus Florida State game. Then going into our second quarter, we're going to discuss the Oklahoma versus Louisville game. Our third quarter is going to be about the Kentucky UNC matchup. And then our fourth quarter is just going to be some quick Q&A. I think we're ready, Sid. Let's get rolling.
Let's jump in. I'm super excited to finally be able to highlight the Lady Vols. And we didn't really play a tough schedule up front here. So playing against Florida State is the first time we're playing a Power 4 conference team. And it went down to the wire. So lots of good nuggets and basketball intel that I want to walk through. Before we even start talking X's and O's, I want to talk about the blue uniforms. The Lady Vol Columbia blue uniforms. Super
I love
cool.
those. Those are so nice. I every time growing up, anytime there was a chance where you guys had any of the blue on or just the lettering where it like popped a bit more, I fell in love with it. I think I always wanted to, I don't know, go to like UNC where the Jordan brand was and all and just rock that color. But no, go ahead. Sorry. I'm jealous that you guys had those.
It looks good on a basketball uniform, that's for sure. So the premise and the background on some of that baby blue color there, that accent color for the Lady Vols. So back in the day in 1968, that's when that baby blue accent color first made its appearance with the women's basketball team. So the Tennessee women's athletics director, Joan Cronin, was looking for women's basketball uniforms, and no companies offered Tennessee orange uniforms. So Cronin chose Columbia blue uniforms with orange letters. And the blue has stuck with us ever since. So kind of some cool background. 1968 certainly was a long time ago. Back when I played at UT, Joan Cronin was still there, and she was a legend around campus, a legend in the Lady Vols athletic department. At the time, we were a separate athletic department, separate from the men. So we had that Lady Vol pride. Joan was right there, right alongside Pat for all of those years and all those championships, which was a pretty cool thing to watch their relationship and how close they really were. And Joan, she was awesome when I was at UT. So kind of cool there with the baby blue uniforms. But let's talk some basketball. So Tennessee did win this one 79-77, and it really was the tale of two different halves. So heading into the game, when we talk about style of play, the Lady Vols were averaging 98.2 points per game coming into this one, and Florida State averaging 96.2 points per game. So we are talking two high-octane offenses. Both like to push the ball. Both like to look for the three ball early. Both are looking to get up and press and really apply pressure all over the floor on the defensive end and make other teams play fast, turn the ball over, be able to exploit that, get quick buckets. And Tennessee, for the most part in the first half, did just that. They stuck with their game plan. Florida State struggled a little bit in the first half, but was able to bring it back some in the second half there. So just really interesting to look at both of these teams and what they do. And Tennessee in particular, I've watched them play a couple times this year with a new coach, Kim Caldwell. She emphasizes this. This is her style. It is so different to watch, but it's fascinating also, right? So she does line changes where she'll sub 5 in, 5 out every couple minutes. So we're talking 3 or 4 times every quarter. Players are subbing in, subbing out. So you're playing 2 minutes max. And so you've got that offense that she's trying to push, that defense she's trying to push, and she's expecting you to go all out in those 2 minutes. And you know you have a line change coming. So you leave it all on the floor, knowing that you're going to come out and get a quick blow. So it's just an interesting thing, especially in the NIL world, where you've got players who want to be flashy, put up tons of points, get the stats. Yeah. Yep. And really, it's interesting that she's been able to get the top talent and the recruits. We've got a big recruiting class coming in for next year, which is exciting to see. I think over time, it's going to be interesting to see, is she able to maintain that, continue to win games? We're only just getting started on some of these tough opponents here. But I think the style is different than everybody else that I've watched. So I think we'll see how that plays out. But they got the W against Florida State, which was good to see. Another big stat for UT is they attempt 40 3-pointers a game. 40 3-pointers a game.
That's absolutely insane.
So that's part of that style that she's preaching and the type of player she's trying to recruit. And again, there's 10 players that she's going to play on average more than 11 minutes. So you're getting in the game. You're playing pretty much equal minutes with everybody else. She's had different starters every game. You don't know if you're starting. I think she's looking at the other team, what their personnel is, who she's going to start the game with. So it's a very different approach than I think everybody else.
Yeah. And a lot of times, right, when they're 7-5, normally there's some sort of drop, right? You don't have all 10 or plus more that are you're trusting to put in to run your offense. They're gonna know it. They're gonna have the same expectation in scout and the defensive setup. There's just people that are good at certain stuff. But for her, I just thought it was interesting. It didn't seem like this, again, my first time really watching Tennessee. It didn't seem like there was a let up. It's very nicely, evenly balanced. And as you mentioned, just that like run and gun style. I mean, they were crashing the glass and crashing it hard because they know they're going to get the ball out and then someone else is going to be up the floor already. I thought it was pretty nuts because 5 in, 5 out. Normally there's a drop somewhere, right? And maybe there is in some personnel on the team, but you can't tell because the other 4 or 3 do such a good job that everyone's playing their role really well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see when we get into SEC play coming up here at the beginning of the year, how we hold up even in our own conference against some of the top competition. So I'm excited to watch it. You know, I was excited to watch us play against Florida State, and I'm thinking, ooh, does this style even work against them? And it did. Happy to see that we were able to pull off a W. But again, tale of two halves. So the first half, Tennessee builds a strong lead, goes up by 18. More than half of the halftime points came from 3-pointers. 8 3-pointers made by Tennessee in the first half.
Wow.
Kind of crazy, right?
Yeah. They're feeling really confident knocking those down.
And another big stat at halftime there, Florida State had 12 turnovers. So Florida State comes into this game only averaging 10.2 turnovers a game. So they had 12 turnovers heading into halftime. Wow. So I thought that was part of the story too, right? We talked about how Tennessee is trying to get in your face, trying to make you play fast, trying to make you turn the ball over. And I think they did a really good job of sticking to that game plan that first half. And then the third quarter comes around and really there was a star that stole the show. And she's leading the nation right now in points per game. Taniyah Latson, she had 26 points in the second half. 16 of those points in the third quarter. So she's leading the nation in points per game. And if you watched her in the third quarter, unbelievable what type of scorer she is. So the commentators were talking, they had asked her before the game, how did you become such a prolific scorer? I mean, she's leading the nation in scoring. More than Juju, more than Paige, more than Hannah, all these top tier players right now. And she said, I played a lot of 1-on-3.
Oh, wow.
Growing up.
Okay.
So that's really interesting, right? Think how hard it would be to score against 3 defenders.
Yeah.
You'd learn to get creative real fast. And I think it shows in her game. And then she's like, I played against boys growing up. You know, I think that's, we all can attest to that. Yeah, right. That only makes you stronger and faster and forces you to pick up your game real fast. So I thought that was kind of cool.
I remember in AAU, we used to have a drill we did. It was like 1-on-2, but I couldn't imagine 1-on-3.
Like, that's intense.
Hey, you 3, you better be able to stop this 1. You know what I mean? Like, I just find that pretty I mean, obviously got her pretty damn good because she's leading the nation, and that's nuts. Wow.
Yeah. Yep. And when I say Florida State dominated that third quarter, they really did. So while they had 12 turnovers in the first half, they come into the third quarter and only have 1 turnover. You've got Taniyah Latson that absolutely goes off, has 16 points. It really looked like two different games already from the first half to that third quarter. And Tennessee hangs around in the fourth quarter. It's a close game pretty much throughout the entire fourth quarter. Spearman and Cooper for Tennessee had huge games, especially down the stretch in the fourth quarter. They're the only two players that score in the fourth quarter for Tennessee, which is uncharacteristic of them, right? Because they're subbing lots of different players in. There's lots of scoring from different players. So those two really were key for Tennessee in the fourth quarter. And I will say that Tennessee sticks to this style with Kim Caldwell so much as they're up by 2. Tennessee's up by 2 with a minute and a half to go in the game. And we come down the floor and shoot a quick 3. And I'm sitting there like, if we'd have made it, I'd have kind of been like, oh, okay, not a good shot. Glad we made that. Well, we miss it. And I'm like, geez, we're up by 2. What's time in possession?
Yeah.
Let's try to get a good, at least a good look at it. And we just fire up a 3. But that's the style. They play it from start to finish. Again, time and possession, or a point guard that puts the ball into their arm and like tries to get into the post and work an outside game or any of that, or set up a play. Throughout the entire game, you don't really see Tennessee set up a ton of plays. They're going to play a lot of 5 out. They set a lot of ball screens for each other. So there is some movement, but it's not like a true set up an offense. Let's run different offenses coming down the court, which Florida State did that on their end. And you see most other teams do that, but Tennessee's not looking to do that. Again, they're looking to run and gun and just play a lot of one-on-one ball and try to score that way. And it pays off for them in some ways, but I'm curious, again, to see how that pays off against even better competition. But like I said, Spearman, she scored a fadeaway 2-pointer with 20 seconds to go to put Tennessee up by 2 at the very end of the game there. And then Florida State tried to come down and answer and really couldn't. So that kind of capped the game. But to me, the big takeaways were, we're still all getting familiar with Kim Caldwell's style. It was good to see Tennessee be able to win that one. They've got to consistently be able to play 40 minutes of that if they're going to want to hang with the top tier of the SEC, and then ultimately get a good seed and go deep in the tournament. Because that's what this is all about. As a Lady Vol, to me, that's our expectation, is to make a Final Four. You probably feel the same way being a Notre Dame grad and having played for the Irish. Like, that is a successful season when you can make the Final Four, ultimately make the national championship, ultimately win it. But you got to get to that Final Four first. And playing well in these early games matters for your seed. It matters how you're prepping for your conference play and how you show up throughout the entire season. So Tennessee needs to get that together. They need to play a full, solid 40 minutes against good competition. I think that's something to watch. And then the other takeaway for me is Tanaya Latson. I mean, she's just unbelievable. Baller. We're going to be hearing her name. When Notre Dame plays Florida State, I'm excited to watch that down the road, right? They're in the ACC. When Stanford plays her, I mean, there's going to be a lot of good matchups for that, where they're going to try to have to shut her down. And man, she's a machine. She can score. So that's going to be fun to watch throughout the season also. Anything from your end on this one? I know you watched some of it. Anything I missed?
I just find it interesting that, you know, the 5 in 5 out flow for Tennessee gets them a big lead, but then it also, like, they give that lead right up. So when you would think it would pay off for you by having fresh legs, right, constantly, it's interesting how that's going into the third quarter and the third quarter in general. I mean, put them back even or even a bit of hole, right? So, like, it's interesting the mindset of the kids with this time that they get, and then time and possession, like you said, coming down, jacking a 3. So it's going to be really interesting to see how she kind of reins that in, because if you're sitting here preaching, you know, rebound, outlet, run, and any shot's a great shot because we put the reps in and we're practicing it. But when the game is on the line, you got to have a couple. And I say a couple because if you're going 5 and 5, you got to have one in each. Somebody who can come get the ball, slow it down, and understand that. And, you know, Tennessee has a lot of new folks there. They got a lot of new people playing this run and gun style. It's a new type of style. It'll just be interesting to see, as I said, like, rein it in, because there is time and possession that happens in the game of basketball. So yeah, let's put a pin in that and keep an eye on it for sure. But it was great to see them out there and competing against a better team finally, right? Somebody who can kind of hold their own.
To me, Tennessee's really got to pick up their half-court defense also. And you can't have the nation's leading scorer come in and absolutely go off in the third quarter like that and put them right back in it. Tennessee blows a 20-point lead.
Yeah.
In the third quarter there. So I think that's another thing that really is still unknown, is if Tennessee can play some half court D. And that's the exact opposite of what we were taught and spent hours on in practice with Pat, was like defense, first. And so I think it's kind of different for me to sit back and watch it, and we're getting beat on middle drives and like some of the basic stuff where we don't handle ball screens as well as we should. And we're just sloppy a little bit, which is hard. But it's still a little bit early in the season. They're still getting used to the system. I know they work on these things in practice. Kim Caldwell talks about that. Like, we work on these things, right? We're trying to get better at it. If they can figure some of that out and still continue to put up almost 100 points a game, we're going to be in business. So I think that's a big opportunity for Tennessee also, is really picking up some defense there. Offensive rebounds are leading the nation right now, but again, they haven't really played anybody until they played Florida State. So to me, I look at that stat and I'm like, that's great. We're getting on the offensive glass, but let's consistently play folks here in the SEC and see where that stat goes. So,
and it'll also just be interesting to see what type of adjustments come against better competition. Maybe it's not the 5-5. Maybe she's doing this in preseason and even early on in the season, just to, before they get into tourney play, right? Just to kind of get a vibe, or conference play, just to get a vibe on how and who is scoring. I don't know. I love the fact that it's a question mark, and the best part for her is she can do it whatever way she wants, right? You're going to live and die by it, run it, go, and that's going to be your style. Trying to follow someone who has a legacy like Pat Summitt is going to be hard as hell regardless. So do it your way. That way, good or bad, you feel you're proud that you did it the way you wanted to. So,
yeah, absolutely. And the last thing I'll say is Cooper for Tennessee, I think, has really stepped up and is at this point our best player. But to your point, I mean, it's hard to see that when you're only playing 2-3 minutes at a time. But she had 22 points, 7 rebounds. She was 10 for 17 in shooting, and she only played 24 minutes. So
that's crazy.
I mean, those are some big stats for
for that also, little minute.
Yeah, and you're getting interrupted in your game.
Yeah,
it's hard to get in the flow when you're getting subbed out every 2 to 3 minutes. That's like it's a whole different mindset on the game of basketball, right? So it takes you a while to adjust, even as a fan or somebody who's studied the game like us. We're watching this and we're like, oh yeah, for the full 40 minutes, this is what they're doing. It's an interesting style, but I'm excited to see where it goes. I hope the best for Kim Caldwell and the Lady Vols, and I think it's going to be exciting if we can hang with some of these top tier teams this year, because we struggled the past few years a little bit. We should have beat South Carolina last year.
Yeah, who ended up that last second 3-point bank shot. Yeah,
but it's going to be kind of fun to watch this style for sure.
All right, jumping into our second quarter, where we're going to discuss and do a little bit of a debrief between the Oklahoma versus Louisville game. Oklahoma's ranked 11th, Louisville coming in on the 22nd seed, or ranked right now. Oklahoma handled business at Louisville, ended up winning 78-72. Oklahoma's only loss right now, they're 7-1, was to Duke in overtime in the last episode that we highlighted. They played last week. Louisville's, they're young. They got a lot of new folks in, trying to understand their position and how to score. They're 5-3, and all 3 of their losses are to top 25 teams: LSU, Kentucky, and now Oklahoma. So, they're right there, and that none of those games have been blowouts by any means. So they're competing. I just think the fact that they're younger, they have new talent in there. They're trying to understand the style, right? And we just talked about this with Tennessee. Everybody has a unique style. I will say Oklahoma at one point in the beginning, they were down 17 in this game. So again, we're seeing just that inconsistency, as we've seen kind of all over, right? Notre Dame's had that, Tennessee's had that. Now Oklahoma is the newest one this week. But Oklahoma came back to ended up to win. And that was the largest comeback victory that Oklahoma's had since they beat Utah in December of 2021. So Oklahoma is the type of team, right? We've highlighted Reagan Beers. We've highlighted they have a good girls coming off the bench. These are 2 teams that play a lot of players. It's the starting 5, and then it goes 9 or 10 deep. They're not subbing them like Tennessee, but people are coming in and giving good minutes, and we'll see that later on when we talk about just highlights of who and what stats that happened. But I just want to mention, and I hope I say her name right, Peyton Verhulst. Absolutely killed it. She transferred from Louisville in December of 2022. This girl came back to Louisville in a different uniform with a different team, put up 21 points. 21 points. I mean, I don't remember her from the Louisville days, but I mean that takes kahunas. That's a lot of you're coming into a spot you used to practice, used to warm up, used to have same coach, good same girls on the team maybe. That's just a tough, uncomfortable environment, I would imagine in general. But for her to come in and just kind of ball out, right? 21 points, 7 boards. She was 50% from the three, 4 of 8. Not only she wasn't like 3 for 3, this girl put up 8 threes and made half of them. So she came into familiar territory, knocked some buckets down, and got their team out with the win. I will say it did get really close down the stretch, right? Oklahoma being down 17, came back. Then we had Olivia Cochran. She ended the game with 17 points, 8 rebounds, 50% from the field, 6 of 12. And honestly, she was their presence inside. She was the main reason Reagan Beers, who we've highlighted numerous times as being that inside outside awesome post player with great hands, held her to 11 points, 11 rebounds. Still a double double, but Reagan could put up 29 and 15, right? So definitely was a quieter night for Reagan from Oklahoma, but that was a lot of due because of Olivia Cochran was in there locking her up inside. So as the game got closer down the stretch, Oklahoma, they started getting, Louisville was fouling them, right? So time and possession, like we've talked about in the Tennessee game, is super important because Oklahoma knocked down those free throws towards the end of the game to put them up by, they were up 2, then they were up 4, then they hit a runner. So that's what makes the ball game towards the end, right? So Louisville had an 11-point lead going into the fourth quarter. They managed to turn the ball over 8 times. Turning the ball over 8 times in one quarter, that's the flip of a game, especially that quarter. We've talked about this again. Look at all of our episodes are coming full circle here, Sid. Having a bad quarter, having a scoring drought, these are things that just kill you as a coach and a team, right? So like I think Louisville held Oklahoma to like 15 points, 16 points per quarter in the first half. They ended up giving up 29 points in the fourth quarter. And when you don't have Olivia Cochran in there, cleaning it up defensively in the paint, being aggressive, being that shot blocker. The writing's on the wall at that point, right? I will say, watching Jeff Walls' post-game press conference, again, he just mentioned like we're young, we have a lot of freshmen, and a lot of those people are coming in and playing hard and producing, but they're starting to understand how important a scouting report is and how from high school to freshman year, that is a huge thing that's added to the college game, right? I used to remember when I was in school, we would have scouting reports that were per play, per player. Think about that. If we're in a man and we know they do their hand signal, I'm going to front the post because I know I'm going to have help side defense. They do another one. I'm going to play behind and push them out to try to get them to the high post because I know it's for an ISO inside. Like that is the type of IQ that I don't think a lot of girls understand. That's a jump. That is a huge jump. And I'm going to tell you, scouting report, we used to get like quizzed before the game.
Oh, yeah.
Halftime of the game. What was the scouting report, right? You're like, I'm sorry, right? But it's so important because you're learning tendencies of players. You're learning the fact they're left-handed, sit on that side, right? So there's just little things that matter in games. And again, it's still early, but we're in December, so we're talking about it. And these are great games and even better matchups. I think the end of it was really turnovers, points off turnovers, and then points in the paint. That's kind of the go-to, right? And if you have one of your post players out, Olivia Cochran, towards the end of a game, I mean, that's a wrap. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it hurt him so much. I mean, you covered it really well there, how much points they gave up down the stretch. I took a note and they talked about it during the game that Oklahoma outscored Louisville 17-4 in the final 4 minutes and 38 seconds of the game. That's it right there. Crazy. And Cochran's out for a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned quick, but these two teams go deep into their bench. I think they're just trying to find a bit of consistency, but that's even great because it's early on and girls are getting the chance to get in and show out. Louisville had 28 points from the bench and Oklahoma had 17. We've talked about, Notre Dame down in the Cayman Islands and we got no bench points, right? We have 2 points for the tournament. That is the type of production, whether you're starting five or first man off the bench or last man off the bench. Woman, my bad, we women. But you come in, right? And you got to produce and give something. So awesome to see that. I do think it's always interesting, like when the winning team has the most turnovers, right? So Oklahoma had 27, Louisville had 19. Points off turnovers, though, Louisville had 28 off 19 turnovers, where Oklahoma had 19 points off of 27 turnovers. So again, it's just so important, time and possession. And I think this game was down to the wire and decisions were made, silly fouls at half court, let Oklahoma get to the free throw line, and it's kind of over after that.
Going back to your point about scouting report and scouting report defense specifically, I think about how blessed we were. You played for McGraw. I played for Summit. Players are stepping in and having to play for Jeff Walls. Probably a similar story where he is that intelligent in the game. His IQ is, I'm sure, through the roof compared to even a lot of coaches out there. Louisville's been a successful program for a long time now. He has the assistant coach out there that just came from Clemson, who was the head coach at Clemson for a few years, was the head coach at Florida for a few years. So now she's on the staff with them. That is such a big jump. I'm just reiterating that because that's how you learn the game too. There's the film aspect of it also, right? When you're doing your scout, you're watching it on film. You're watching every play they run. You're watching your position, as you mentioned. Yep. And then you're going on the court and you're walking through all the action. You're playing live against their action with your scout team, right? Usually boys on campus, men on campus they bring in, right? That beat you up. So you spend so much time throughout the week preparing for these teams, and it is the X factor. It is the confidence that you then walk on the court with, where you feel like you know every move they're going to make. You know their personnel. You know who's a shooter, who's a penetrator. Like I'm watching Georgia Amore tonight, and I'm like, man, her mid-range game, she's looking to score every time she touches the ball. And I've got to be able to guard her as a three-point shooter, even though she went 0-for-5 tonight. We're not talking about that game, but I've got to be able to guard her as a three-point shooter. Right. Her mid-range, she's going to take one quick dribble into a 1-2 step off of 1 foot, going to shoot it with a touch, and she gets to the rack. Like those are the things, especially on the guard side, you've got to know about every single person on the floor, especially at this level, because if you're playing at this level for some of these top tier programs, anyone is capable of going off that night. And we've talked about that a lot. This is the whole full circle thing where it's a lot of these episodes we're talking about this. Man, she had a 30 piece. She had a 30 piece. Who is this? She had a 30 piece. Anyone is capable of going off. And that's how important that scouting report defense is. And you've got players like Cochran who she fouls out of the game, and Louisville looked like a different team down the stretch.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it shows how important Cochran was the first 38 minutes of the game, you know, and like the scouting report on her and what that would have looked like. And man, now I got to play against Reagan Beers, and what does she bring? And I mean, there's just all these players and the amount of time that you spend in that scouting report defense for every single team you play. At least that's the way it was when I was playing for Pat. It didn't matter if we were playing against Middle Tennessee State or we were playing against UConn. We treated that very seriously, and that's what these top tier programs are doing.
Absolutely. You make awesome points, kind of just showing what you're watching film. You have scouting report, then you're talking about it, and you need to know. But then there's in-game adjustments of they've played 8 games, and now they're adding tweaks to each possession or each position in each possession that you have to just adjust to on the fly. Maybe they came down, ran it once. Now your assistant coach is telling you, hey, that play, they go here, but they also go on the, you know what I mean? So you're also live in the game, have to read and react and be successful. And that's a game of basketball. It's just who does it better, quicker, stronger, and more efficient. Last thing that I wanted to mention about Oklahoma and Louisville is Sahara Williams came in, for Oklahoma, scored all 15 of her points in the fourth quarter. She finished with 15 points, 7 rebounds. So, I mean, 15 of 29 that Oklahoma had in the quarter. I mean, that's the ball game right there. If you're up 11 going into the fourth, you give up 29, and one individual kind of just goes off, has a quarter. That's the ball game. You lose by 6. So
let's jump into the last one we wanted to highlight. for this episode, and that is Kentucky versus North Carolina. North Carolina wins this one at home, 72-53. That score's a little bit deceiving. It was close. It was more close throughout the entire game, and score kind of ran away at the end there. But UNC really, from the very start of this game, they jumped on it, and they really dictated.
Set the tone.
They did. They dictated the entire game. And honestly, I thought for the most part, UNC played a full 40-minute game. Mm-hmm. There's going to be runs. There's going to be, and that's going to happen when you're playing against Georgia A&M and Kentucky and some of the things they're capable of doing. They're a good team. But UNC had an answer for it. And I thought it was interesting. I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but UNC goes into a zone to start the second half. I think they were kind of looking to make some type of halftime adjustment, even though they played pretty well in the first half. They make that adjustment. Kentucky whaps a three. They get right out of it. Right? They go right back to their man. They're like, maybe that's not our night for the zone. It might kind of make sense. And they get out of it. And I just thought that they were really well prepared for Kentucky, who has Georgia A&M. I talk about her a ton, but she's one of the best point guards in the country when you watch her. And I thought they had an answer for it all tonight. Georgia had an off night. She always had a hand in her face. I think they made it really tough for her. She goes 0 for 5 from the three. You don't see that a ton from her. She has 10 points in the first half, doesn't score in the second half. Yeah, they absolutely shut her down. So
I thought she was rolling there for the going into halftime. She was kind of creating her own, getting little bunnies, as you mentioned about even earlier in the episode. We were talking about something separate, but her mid-range game, I was like, okay, but she's, and she's not only mid-range pull, but she's driving, attacking, and then kicking it out to others. So I thought for sure it was going to get closer.
Yeah, I did too. And I kind of wanted it to. I think it's fun when these games go down to the wire here. And it was honestly a really good matchup. I mean, this is a blue blood matchup on the boys' side, right? Kentucky versus UNC, but capable of being that on the girls' side with Kenny Brooks and what they're able to bring on the Kentucky side, and then UNC and some of their seniority. Coming into this game, I thought it was really interesting, and shout out to Andrea Carter, former Lady Vol, who called this out. But she mentioned coming into this game, UNC's 2 starting post players have a combined over 200 games started, whereas Kentucky's 2 starting post players combined have started 12 games.
Okay, well, there you go, right?
I mean, it's kind of telling. And then what was the story of the game? This game.
It was points in the paint. It was
points in the paint.
At the rim. Yeah.
And I really thought that Kentucky was settling for a lot of outside shots early on and kind of set the tone for the game. Their post presence down low was pretty much non-existent. Key, who usually is a big player for them, for Kentucky down low, really was super quiet. You didn't even know she was out there half the time. I'm a fan of hers, but I really thought that she was kind of taken out of the game tonight. And UNC, they were getting the ball inside. They were attacking. They weren't settling for those outside jumpers like Kentucky was. And I think it was really proven in the game. And UNC scored 4 times the amount of paint points than Kentucky did at the end there, 42-10 paint points. You're not going to beat a team.
No. And the crazy part is Kentucky, one of the stats the announcer said is they were number 1 in the nation in limiting their opposing team's points at the rim. They were holding teams to 33% of scoring at the rim. The first half alone, UNCA was 70%. They were 12 of 17 at field goals at the rim. It was rough. It for sure was rough when you see that points in the paint. And the interesting thing is their turnovers were so low. This was like the best way to ball. What do I want to say, Sid? I sound silly, but do you know what I mean?
Not a lot of crazy turnovers. Yeah, they took care of it for the most part. Gotcha.
Yeah, Kentucky had 13, UNC had 9. So everybody was keeping tabs on things. It's coming down to those paint points. And UNC was on the attack. Kelly finished with 18 points, 6 assists. Perfect from the 3-point line, 3 for 3 for UNC. My favorite name, god dang, had 16 points and 9 rebounds. She was 7 of 9. And then Utsby comes in and has 13 points, 8 boards. I mean, UNC dominated in every part of the game. And with, Georgia A&M kind of having no points the second half. And Strack is another tall, lengthy post player. She's been averaging a double-double. She finished with 4 points, 4 boards. So they absolutely brought the defensive end intensity for sure. All right, so let's wrap up with our fourth quarter. Just a quick Q&A. Sid, I don't think you know these questions, so let's just rattle off. And you'll go and answer one, and then I'll answer one. Sound cool?
That sounds cool. I'm
Awesome.
anxious to see what you're about to ask me.
Well, with all these games and, different environments, different travel schedules, what do you do as you're an athlete, where you're at, where are you going? I just find it interesting. And as I was watching these games, I was like, man, I would have liked to play in that gym. I would have liked to play in that one. So what is one gym that you did not get to play in that you would have wanted to, and why?
So I've heard Wisconsin has a really cool gym. Never got
Yeah.
to play there. We didn't typically play a lot of Big Ten schools back when
Mhm.
I was at UT. The Big Ten wasn't a particularly strong conference. I think it's gotten a lot stronger since then. So Pat really tried to schedule our non-conference games as tough as possible, and we didn't play any Big Ten school in our non-conference regular season. The only time we played a Big Ten school was in the tournament, right? So never got to play at Wisconsin, but I've heard that it's really nice there. So that one's one that I probably would have enjoyed just because I've heard it's so nice.
Yeah. Been there. It is nice. Very, very large. One thing that I think is interesting is that the games that I wish I would have played at, you definitely have. So
Okay.
the two that I would have loved to play at would be UNC or Duke. I'm just super jealous. Never made it over there. I don't know how I missed this. Right? But obviously we're in the Big East. Now that ND's in the ACC, they're playing those teams. I'm just super jealous. Never got over there. Never got to feel that environment. Both gyms are just like historic in their own rights. So definitely jealous. Didn't get to go there.
Yeah, Cameron Indoor is very cool. When we played, we were both in the top 10, I believe, because it was just a sold out atmosphere. The Cameron Crazies were going nuts. And I just remember thinking to myself, this is a very cool environment. Small gym, very small,
Sid,
but
Thank
it's
you
cool.
for rubbing it in. Thank you.
Sorry. No, that wouldn't even have been my choice, though. It would have been up there. But we got to play at Madison Square Garden my sophomore year, and that was the Mecca. That's like the Mecca of.
Making me feel bad.
That was a cool one.
Okay, we're jealous. We're jealous. Next question. What was the toughest gym to play in and why?
Stanford.
Okay, why?
Yeah, their fans are super into it. They were really good. So it wasn't like we were going to walk in there and, the 6-man wasn't going to really matter because we're probably going to beat this team, which was some of the teams that we played. And you know and feel that when you were at Notre Dame too. Stanford was good. Their fans were into it. And when we played them my freshman year, we lost to Stanford at Stanford. And I remember we had to fly home to our homes because it was our 3.5, 4 day that you got for Christmas break. And it was just like awful, that flight back. But it was a very tough environment to play there. Their fans are into it. It's like this dark sea of red. And it just like clashed with our colors so bad. I was just like, we just don't even belong in this gym right now. And obviously Tara Vanderveer was one of the best to do it. So she brings the game plan. Fans love her. Fans love her teams. They're very IQ'd and talk about scouting report defense. Like they're one of the toughest teams to scout. And it just like adds to the atmosphere there. But the cool thing is we lost to them my freshman year. And then we turned around and beat them in the national championship. So that was a good revenge game for us. But I'm going to go with Stanford. I'm curious to see what you're going to pick there.
I think you might be shocked for real. Toughest gym to play in was, well, I have two. The first one is Rutgers. Yo, their fans and their band. The band was so mean. They would look things up about you, your life, and everything. At one point, they were shouting my mom and dad's name, like, they don't love you. And I was like,
oh my gosh.
Like, it was like, talk about like uber personal, right? They would just find out information like that. And I mean, you run like right in front of them to go to the locker room and you hear that on the way out, you hear that on the way in, and you're like, stay focused, stay focused. Like it was crazy. And then my other one is Georgetown. They played in this like smaller, super, super intimate gym where I'm talking like maybe 10 rows of bleachers on each side. And it just felt like a high school game that It was the like state championship in a high school game. It was absolutely packed with people and it was rowdy. Like it was rowdy. That's all I can say. That's all I
Yeah.
remember is it was like, how is there this many people in here? This is insane.
Yeah. That makes me think of West Virginia. That was
Oh
another
yeah.
tough one that we put. Their fans are
Yeah. They
into
got
it like that too.
the musket that shoots off before the
Yeah,
game.
yeah. So yeah, you remember playing there.
Yeah,
We played there
yeah.
once and we were leaving and Pat was like, "We will never play here again." I mean, we beat them and everything, but she was just
Yeah,
like, "I don't want to put you guys through that again," because they were like taunting us
yeah.
also. Kind of crazy.
It's nuts what people can get into and what they say. It's really crazy. All right, last question. What is one of the coolest things that you did while traveling for a game? So I know, right? A lot of times coaches like to, add to a trip something fun, a notable place to eat dinner. There were times where, when you're traveling so much, it's hard to even know what city you're in, what you're doing. You just are focusing on film, scouting report, game, go, home, homework. So it was nice when they were able to sprinkle in some fun stuff. So what is one memorable thing that you did while you guys were traveling for a game?
I always loved the long Christmas games. Like we would, like I mentioned, travel out to Stanford around the Christmas time. The next year, we played at Madison Square Garden, and that was a whole week we got to stay in New York City. And we stayed in the New
Hmm.
York Athletic Club because Pat was like this honorable lifetime
Oh
member. It was
gosh.
insane.
Oh gosh, it would.
It was
Oh,
really cool. Even just like be able to walk in there, but let alone we stayed there. And there's a gym in there, so that's where we practiced. That's where we worked
mhm.
out while we were there. And then we got to go to a Broadway show.
Very
We
cool.
had free time in New York City. It was the first time I had ever been to New York City. I'm a
Yeah.
sophomore in college. Like that for me, bonding with my teammates, walking around Central Park when it's ice cold, but we didn't care because we were in Central Park, like things like
Yep.
that are just so much fun. And it's like when I look back at my college experience, yeah, it was fun playing the game of basketball. And I do have a lot of memories about the basketball side, but most of my memories are hanging out with my teammates
Hmm.
and not even on the court. I think that's a really good question because you're traveling with these people, you're spending so many hours with these people. And when you get that glimpse of, hey, we don't have team dinner tonight and we have free time and we can pick the restaurant we want to go to and we can go shop or we can go to a
Hmm.
movie or we can walk around Central Park, like I mentioned. That's when like you build all these fun memories, and that was a special one for me. What's yours? I'm curious to hear.
I don't know if you knew this, and I don't know why or how we got this to happen. Coach McGraw must have been in a really good mood. My senior year, we're out in Utah playing the first games, the first rounds of the NCAA tournament. So we're tourney time, do or die, right? Pretty sure she let Brittany, Mallory, and I know before the game, like, we have something super special for you guys. Like, you have to win, like, or else this is going to it's going to be awful. And I'm like, oh, all right, all right. I'm pretty sure she told us, but I can't remember. But we beat Utah, thankfully. And then we had food and everything ready for us in the locker room. And we had to get ready because we all got to go to the Lady Gaga concert. It
Cool.
was
That's
it was
awesome.
in Utah. It was like just down the street, and they were like, "Hurry up, eat, change, get ready. We got you guys tickets." And we were like, "This is insane." And it also
That's
would
so
have
cool.
sucked if we would have lost. Like that would have been terrible, right? So then obviously that was super fun. Something I mean, we've also been privileged enough to do a Broadway show when we were traveling in New York. So that's amazing. But the fact that we got to go to a Lady Gaga concert, I just was like, I don't know how this happened. It was probably the only thing maybe to do in the area. So they were like, yeah, let's do it. But then the fun part is we actually, had to refocus, play the second game. We won that. So it was like, whew, no harm, no foul. Everything's back on track. Don't worry, coach. Thanks
Yeah,
for
no
thanks for the fun.
pressure.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really
Well,
cool.
yeah, it was a fun surprise for sure. All right. Well, thanks for wrapping up that quick Q&A that you didn't know anything about. You did so good. I loved your answers. We're going to close out this episode. So, first quarter, we talked about how Tennessee handled business against Florida State. Our second quarter, we talked about how Oklahoma squeaked it out against Louisville. And then in our third, we mentioned how Kentucky is kind of still struggling to find some offensive presence, but that UNC was able to handle them at home as well. And then our fourth quarter is that awesome Q&A we just did. Just wanted to touch base what we covered and what's coming up next. So we're going to have another bonus drop Monday episode. coming up here where we're going to deep dive into 2 top 10 matchups that are currently in play, literally. Notre Dame versus Texas and South Carolina versus Duke. So make sure you tune in. Hit us up on any of our social medias if you have any questions you want us to have answered. And thanks, Sid. This was fun. A lot of good games going on.
A lot of good games. The season, as we have been saying, is not disappointing. So looking forward to watching those big matchups happening for that SEC versus ACC challenge. And we'll talk to you all when we drop that next episode on Monday.
Awesome. Sounds good. See you, Sid.
See you, Beck.
That's the 28.5 final buzzer for today's episode. Don't forget to hit follow on your preferred podcast platforms to catch every play-by-play. New episodes drop each week throughout the season.
If you've enjoyed our courtside chat, drop us a review or follow us on our social media accounts. And remember, from females who have played the game, the size of the ball matters.